The number 10 appears in the Bible with astonishing frequency, and its presence is no mere coincidence. In fact, it is found in some of the most momentous events, from the creation of the world to divine judgments. Why is this number so significant? Throughout the scriptures, 10 symbolizes something much deeper than just a number. It is a figure that reflects the totality, fullness, and completeness of what God does. This number is not limited only to grand narratives like creation or the plagues of Egypt. It also appears in deeply personal moments that invite us to reflect on our relationship with God. By examining how the number 10 is used, we can discover a pattern that profoundly connects all the stories, not only in the Old Testament, but also in the New Testament. This pattern speaks to us of how God creates, ordains, judges, and provides. As we move forward, we will delve into each of these aspects. But before continuing, I ask you a question. Have you ever stopped to think about the power a single number holds in the Bible? What could the number 10 mean for you in your personal and spiritual life? The Bible begins with an act of powerful words. In the first chapter of Genesis, God creates the world with just 10 declarations. In each of these 10 words, the universe takes shape, light is separated from darkness, land appears, and creatures begin to inhabit it. This act of creation is neither random nor accidental, but an orderly and complete process. God does not merely describe what he wants to happen. He commands it with words that possess an intrinsic power to materialize. Jewish sages, centuries ago, noted the importance of this number and interpreted it profoundly. The Talmud tells us that with 10 words, God created the world, and this is no coincidence. God's words are not mere suggestions. They are the force that makes things happen. What God says happens, and this becomes a fundamental principle for understanding how his relationship with creation works. Each of the 10 God-said statements in Genesis 1 represents a manifestation of power. It is not simply an act of physical creation, but also an act of bringing order, structure, and purpose to chaos. The number 10 here not only implies completeness, but it is also a symbol of God's authority over everything that exists. The same word that created the world ordained the moral creation of man. In other words, the same 10 God-said statements not only built the physical world, but also established the moral and spiritual framework that would govern the relationship between God and humanity. Just as the physical world was ordered with 10 words, human morality and divine order were equally structured with 10 commandments. What does this tell us about the nature of God and his plan for the world? If God's words have the power to create everything we see, shouldn't they also have the power to order it, to teach us how to live correctly? This concept invites us to reflect. Are we listening to God's words in our daily lives and letting them shape our actions and thoughts? After creation, another crucial moment in the Bible where the number 10 appears is in the giving of the 10 Commandments. These are not simply rules for living, but a complete guide to ordering human life in two fundamental directions: our relationship with God and our relationship with others. God not only wants us to worship and respect him, but he also calls us to live in harmony with our fellow human beings, respecting life, truth, and integrity. The 10 Commandments were given by God on Mount Sinai, and their importance goes beyond being a list of rules. They are a moral structure that establishes how one should live in an orderly manner. The first 4 commandments focus on our relationship with God, recognizing him as the one true God, not making idols, keeping his name holy, and observing the day of rest, the Sabbath. These commandments establish the foundation for a proper spiritual relationship. However, the remaining 6 commandments are equally important. They deal with our interaction with others, honoring our parents, not murdering, being faithful in marriage, not stealing, telling the truth, and not coveting what belongs to others. These rules are not mere prohibitions, but principles that ensure we live in an orderly, just society filled with mutual respect. When Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment was, he summarized the entire Decalogue into 2 key commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22:37-40. In this summary, Jesus reveals that the 10 Commandments are not just rules to follow, but principles of love that must be lived out in all areas of life. The fascinating thing about the 10 Commandments is that they are not just laws imposed from above. but a reflection of what it means to live a fulfilling life, at peace with God and with one's neighbor. These commandments invite us to look at our lives through the lens of love for God and love for others. How can we live out these commandments today? In a world full of tensions and conflicts, how can we apply love toward God and toward our neighbor in a way that truly transforms our relationships and our environment? One of the most dramatic moments in biblical history where the number 10 plays a fundamental role is the 10 plagues that God sent upon Egypt. These plagues were not mere natural disasters, but a divine judgment, a confrontation between the power of God and the false gods of Egypt. Each plague aimed to tear down one of the fundamental beliefs of Egyptian society, revealing the impotence of their gods in the face of God's absolute power. The first plague, the transformation of the water of the Nile into blood, discredited the god of the Nile, Hapi, who supposedly protected the river. With the water turned to blood, Egypt's source of life and sustenance was destroyed, demonstrating that not even the Egyptian gods could protect life itself. The second plague, the invasion of frogs, discredited Heshet, the goddess of fertility. The frogs, which were originally seen as symbols of fertility and protection, became an unbearable plague that covered the entire land, demonstrating the goddess's inability to control her own domain. Throughout the plagues, each was more severe than the last, from the flies that invaded Egypt to the total darkness that covered the country for 3 days, challenging the sun god, Ra. Each plague was a direct judgment, a reminder that all earthly powers are overshadowed by the absolute power of God. But the 10th and final plague was the most devastating, the death of the firstborn. This plague affected all Egyptian families, including the household of Pharaoh, who considered himself a living god. With this final plague, God demonstrated that he not only ruled over nature, but over life itself, and that no human power, no matter how great, could escape his judgment. What is impressive about the 10 plagues is the deliberate structure of their progression. They began as nuisances and escalated in severity until reaching total destruction. Each plague was not only an act of judgment, but also a gradual process of showing Egypt that its system of worship was false, and that only God had power over everything. When thinking about the 10 plagues, several questions arise. What does it mean that God uses such a meticulous sequence to execute his judgment? How can we learn from these lessons about the power of faith and obedience to God in our own lives? The number 10 not only appears in moments of judgment or cosmic creation, but it also manifests in deeply personal situations. A clear example of this is found in the story of Daniel when he was taken into exile in Babylon. Daniel and his friends were selected to be part of the king's training program, and they were offered the royal food, but Daniel, faithful to his principles, decided not to eat it. Instead of protesting, he made a proposal. Test your servants for 10 days, giving them only vegetables and water. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the king's food, and treat your servants according to what you see. Daniel 1:12. How can we relate this 10-day test to our own lives? Daniel was not only testing his obedience to God, but also trusting that God would provide for him and his friends in a way that would be healthier than any food the king could offer. And at the end of those 10 days, Daniel and his friends looked healthier than all the other young men in the program, which not only favored them before the king, but also demonstrated God's faithfulness to those who honor him. This episode invites us to reflect on our own life of faith. What do the 10 days of testing mean in our lives? It is a reminder that sometimes God calls us to face trials, not with protests, but with trust in his provision. And as in Daniel's case, when we trust in him, we will find ourselves not only surviving the test, but thriving in it. Furthermore, the reference to the number 10 in this context highlights the idea that life's trials are not just random tests, but moments measured by God to prove our faithfulness and obedience. As in Daniel's case, what is sought is not just our endurance, but that we trust the process in God's plan. In our lives, how many times do we find ourselves in difficult situations that seem to be a measured test, perhaps not of 10 days, but of 10 decisive moments? How do we respond to those tests? With faith that God will complete his work in us? The number 10 appears constantly in the Bible, in moments of creation, judgment, testing, and revelation. Through the 10 words that created the universe, the 10 commandments that guide us, the 10 plagues that destroyed false worship in Egypt, and the 10-day tests that purify our character, this number teaches us about the fullness and completeness in God's plans. What is interesting is that in each of these stories, the number 10 not only symbolizes a quantity, but a complete action. Every appearance of this number indicates that what God does is whole, perfect, and lacking nothing. From creation to personal trials, we see that everything God does is the exact measure of what is needed to fulfill His purpose. But here comes the deeper question. How do we respond to this fullness that God offers? The number 10, more than a simple symbol, invites us to reflect on the totality of God's grace and justice. In our lives, are we responding to what He has done for us with a complete response of faith, obedience, and gratitude? Like those 10 lepers, we have all been healed, but only one returned to give thanks. Will we be like Him, giving thanks and acknowledging how complete God has been in our lives? This is the challenge that the number 10 presents to us, an invitation to live a complete, full life in response to what God has already done for us.